Welcome to DCF Investigations. The neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip usually promise escape, a shimmering oasis in the Mojave Desert where fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye. But on the night of September 7th, 1996, the electric hum of the city masked a darker, more volatile energy. It was a Saturday night that vibrated with the heat of anticipation, drawing celebrities, high rollers, and street figures into a collision course that would alter the landscape of American culture forever. Amidst the glitz of the MGM Grand and the roar of expensive engines, a tragedy was unfolding, one that would silence a generation's most potent voice and spawn a mystery that remains as captivating as it is frustrating. Tonight, we open the files on the assassination of Tupac Shakur, a case that is not merely about a murder, but about a war between coasts, a failure of justice, and the extinguishing of a star that burned too bright and too fast. To truly understand the events of that fateful September night, we cannot simply look at the crime scene. We must first understand the man at the center of the storm and the turbulent era that forged him. Tupac Shakur was not just a rapper. He was a walking contradiction, a poet-warrior born into the fires of revolution. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a prominent member of the Black Panther Party, and she was acquitted of over 150 charges of conspiracy against the United States government just a month before Tupac was born. He was named after Tupac Amaru II, an 18th century Peruvian revolutionary who led an indigenous uprising against Spanish rule. This legacy of resistance was encoded in his DNA. By 1996, Tupac was the most famous and perhaps the most controversial artist in the world. He had transcended music to become a cultural icon, representing the raw, unfiltered anger and pain of the inner city. But his rise was marred by constant conflict. He had survived being shot 5 times in the lobby of Quad Studios in New York in 1994, an event that birthed his paranoia and ignited the infamous East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry. After serving prison time for a sexual abuse conviction, charges he vehemently denied, he was bailed out by Marion Suge Knight, the imposing CEO of Death Row Records. This deal, often described as a deal with the devil, aligned Tupac with the most dangerous record label in history. He traded his freedom for loyalty to an organization that operated more like a street gang than a music corporation. The atmosphere in 1996 was toxic. The media fueled a feud between Tupac's Death Row Records in Los Angeles and Sean Puffy Combs' Bad Boy Records in New York. It was a verbal war that had turned physical, with threats and posturing escalating into real violence. When Tupac landed in Las Vegas that weekend, he was riding high on the success of his album All Eyes on Me. But he was also a man with a target on his back, moving through a world where the line between entertainment and organized crime had completely vanished. The primary reason for the gathering in Las Vegas was the heavyweight boxing match between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Tupac and Tyson shared a bond. They were both seen as villains by the mainstream press, misunderstood black men who had risen from poverty to the pinnacle of success, only to be vilified. The fight itself was anticlimactic, lasting only 109 seconds before Tyson secured a knockout. But the brevity of the match meant that the night was young, and the energy that had built up in the arena had nowhere to go but out into the streets. At approximately 8:50 p.m., as the crowd spilled out of the arena, an incident occurred that many investigators believe was the catalyst for the murder. Inside the MGM Grand, near the bank of elevators, Tupac Shakur, accompanied by Suge Knight and their entourage, spotted a man named Orlando Anderson. Anderson, known on the streets as Baby Lane, was a reputed member of the Southside Compton Crips. Months earlier, Anderson and his crew had allegedly robbed a death row associate at a Foot Locker in Lakewood, California, stealing a chain with a death row medallion. In the culture of the time, this was not just a theft. It was an act of war. Video surveillance from the casino floor captured what happened next. Tupac, seeing Anderson, lunged at him. He famously asked, "You from the South?" before striking Anderson. The rest of the death row entourage, known as the Mob Piru Bloods, swarmed in. They kicked and stomped Anderson while he was on the ground. The beating was brutal but brief, broken up by casino security. Crucially, no police report was filed at the scene. Anderson declined to cooperate with security, and Tupac and his crew left the building. This moment, frozen on grainy CCTV footage, is the pivot point of the entire timeline. It shifted the night from a celebration of a boxing victory to a potential gang retaliation. After the brawl, the group made their way to the Luxor Hotel, where staying. The mood was reportedly high, fueled by adrenaline. Tupac was heard boasting about the fight, seemingly unaware that he had just humiliated a member of a rival gang in a public forum. At the hotel, Tupac changed clothes. He swapped his silk shirt for a black basketball jersey and wore a heavy medallion around his neck, claiming ownership of the perilous lifestyle he led. He was not wearing a bulletproof vest. He often refused to wear one, claiming it was uncomfortable or that his destiny was already written. The plan for the evening was to attend a charity concert at Club 62, a venue owned by Suge Knight. The caravan of luxury cars left the Luxor and headed toward the club. Tupac rode in the passenger seat of Suge Knight's black 1996 BMW 750iL. The car was a fortress of German engineering, but it was not armored. They drove with the windows down, the desert air rushing in, blasting music at high volume. The atmosphere was celebratory. They were untouchable. They were the kings of Las Vegas. As the convoy moved east on Flamingo Road, they were stopped by motorcycle police for playing music too loudly and for not having license plates on the new BMW. The officers ran a check, found no warrants, and released them with a warning. It is haunting to consider that this brief interaction with law enforcement was the last time Tupac would be seen alive and safe by authorities. It was a momentary pause in a timeline racing toward disaster. At approximately 11:15 p.m., the BMW halted at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, right in front of the Maxim Hotel. To their left was a Chrysler sedan occupied by two women who had caught Tupac's eye. He was standing up through the sunroof, engaging with them, inviting them to the club. To their right was an empty lane. Moments later, a white late-model Cadillac Seville pulled up quietly into that empty lane on the right side of the BMW. The windows of the Cadillac were tinted. As the car came to a stop, the rear passenger window rolled down. The barrel of a .40 caliber Glock pistol emerged from the darkness of the vehicle. 13 rounds were fired in rapid succession. The sound was deafening, shattering the festive atmosphere of the Strip. 4 of those bullets found their mark. One struck Tupac in the chest, passing through his right lung. Another hit his arm, and another grazed his thigh. Suge Knight was hit in the head by fragmentation. though he was not critically injured. The shooter's car, the white Cadillac, screeched its tires and made a sharp right turn onto Koval Lane, disappearing into the neon-lit night. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigned. Suge Knight, despite his injury and the blown-out tires of the BMW, pulled a U-turn and raced away from the scene, heading west on Flamingo Road. He was trying to get to a hospital, but the car was failing. They made it as far as Las Vegas Boulevard and Harmon Avenue before coming to a stop. Police officers who had heard the shots or seen the speeding vehicle surrounded the car. At first, the police treated the victims as suspects, ordering them out of the car at gunpoint. It was a scene of blood and confusion. Tupac, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe, was extracted from the vehicle. His last words, according to the first responder on the scene, Officer Chris Carroll, were a defiant curse directed at the officer when asked who shot him. Paramedics rushed Tupac to the University Medical Center. The trauma team worked frantically to stabilize him. He had lost a massive amount of blood. He underwent multiple surgeries that night. Doctors were forced to remove his right lung to stop the internal bleeding. For the next 6 days, Tupac Shakur lay in a medically induced coma. The hospital became a fortress, surrounded by police, media, and grieving fans. Inside, his family, including his mother Afeni, gathered, praying for a miracle. During those 6 days, the investigation, or the lack thereof, began. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department was ill-equipped to handle a gang-related homicide of this magnitude. The witnesses were uncooperative. The members of Death Row Records, adhering to the code of the streets, refused to talk to the police. This wall of silence would become the greatest obstacle to justice. The police did not secure the scene at Flamingo and Koval effectively. Potential evidence was lost. The white Cadillac was never found in the immediate days following the shooting. On Friday, September 13, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Shakur was pronounced dead. He was 25 years old. The cause of death was respiratory failure and cardiopulmonary arrest associated with multiple gunshot wounds. The news sent shockwaves around the globe. Vigils were held in Los Angeles, New York, and cities across the world. But along with the grief came the questions. Who killed Tupac and why? To answer these questions, we must delve into the suspects and the theories that have swirled for decades. The most prominent and immediate suspect was Orlando Anderson. The logic was simple and brutal. Retaliation. Tupac had humiliated Anderson in the MGM Grand lobby just hours before. Anderson was a Crip. Tupac was affiliated with the Bloods through Death Row. The shooting fit the modus operandi of a drive-by, a signature tactic of gang warfare in the 1990s. Police received tips almost immediately naming Anderson. Informants stated that after the beating, Anderson and his crew had regrouped, secured a weapon, and went hunting for Tupac. They spotted the BMW on the strip and made their move. Anderson was interviewed by the police, but was released due to a lack of concrete evidence. He vehemently denied any involvement until his own death in an unrelated gang shootout in 1998. Because he was never charged, the case officially remained open. But for many on the streets of Compton, the case was closed. Baby Lane did it. However, the simplicity of the gang retaliation theory did not satisfy everyone. A second, more sinister theory emerged, pointing the finger at the very man sitting next to Tupac in the car, Suge Knight. Proponents of this theory argue that Suge Knight orchestrated the hit to prevent Tupac from leaving Death Row Records. Rumors circulated that Tupac was auditing the label's finances and planning to start his own production company, taking his master recordings and his millions in future revenue with him. In this narrative, Suge Knight hired the hitman to ensure Tupac became a martyr for the label rather than a competitor. Critics of this theory point out the obvious flaw. Suge Knight was in the car. He was in the direct line of fire and was actually hit. It seems incredibly risky to arrange a drive-by shooting on a vehicle you are driving. Furthermore, Tupac was death row's biggest cash cow. Killing him would, and eventually did, lead to the downfall of the entire empire. Yet, the theory persists. Fueled by Suge Knight's reputation for ruthlessness and the strange fact that he was the only person in the car to survive relatively unscathed while Tupac was riddled with bullets. Then there is the East Coast connection. The feud with the notorious B.I.G., also known as Biggie Smalls, was at its peak. Tupac had released the diss track Hit 'Em Up just months prior, in which he claimed to have slept with Biggie's wife and threatened the lives of Bad Boy's staff. Some investigators and journalists explored the possibility that the Southside Crips were hired by New York associates to carry out the hit, merging the gang rivalry with the rap beef. While Biggie denied any involvement and was reportedly devastated by the news of Tupac's death, the shadow of the East Coast-West Coast War hung heavy over the investigation. Tragically, Biggie himself would be murdered in a remarkably similar drive-by shooting in Los Angeles just 6 months later, fueling speculation that the two murders were connected, a tit-for-tat exchange of kings. Beyond these tangible suspects, the assassination of Tupac Shakur became a breeding ground for conspiracy theories that ventured into the realm of the fantastical. The most enduring of these is the theory that Tupac faked his own death. Believers, often called alivists, point to a myriad of supposed clues. They analyze the 7-day theory, noting that his album, The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, was released under the alias Machiavelli shortly after his death. Niccolò Machiavelli was an Italian Renaissance philosopher who wrote about faking one's death to fool enemies. The numerology obsessed over by theorists is exhaustive. Tupac was shot on the 7th. He survived for 7 days. His age, 25, adds up to 7. The time of death, 4:03, adds up to 7. They argue that Tupac, weary of the fame and the threats, orchestrated an elaborate escape, possibly to Cuba, where his aunt Assata Shakur was living in political asylum. They scrutinized the autopsy photo, claiming it doesn't look like him, or that the tattoos are missing. They cite the fact that he was cremated the day after he died, canceling the funeral service as evidence of a cover-up. While these theories provide comfort to fans who cannot accept his loss, they crumble under the weight of forensic evidence and the testimony of those who held his hand as he died. Another dark avenue of conspiracy involves the federal government. The FBI had a thick file on Tupac. As the son of a Black Panther and a charismatic leader capable of mobilizing young people, he was viewed by some as a threat to the establishment. The COINTELPRO operations of the past, which targeted Black radical groups, were cited as a precedent. Proponents of this theory suggest that the government encouraged the East-West War to neutralize powerful Black voices, or even facilitated the assassination by creating the conditions for it to happen. While the FBI did monitor Tupac, particularly after he shot 2 off-duty police officers in Atlanta, charges that were later dropped, there is no declassified evidence linking federal agents to the assassination itself. For 27 years, the case sat in a state of cold storage. It was the most famous unsolved murder in hip-hop history. The Las Vegas Police Department was accused of incompetence and apathy. The streets knew what happened, but the court of law remained silent. However, the narrative shifted dramatically in late 2023. To understand this breakthrough, we must return to the white Cadillac and the man who was sitting in the front passenger seat, Duane Keefe D Davis. Keefe D is the uncle of Orlando Anderson and a self-proclaimed shot caller for the Southside Compton Crips. For years, after he secured a proffer agreement with the government that gave him immunity for what he said in interviews regarding other crimes, Keefe D began to talk. He wrote a book. He did interviews on YouTube and in documentaries. He bragged about being the shot caller that night. In his accounts, Keefe D detailed exactly what happened. He admitted to obtaining the Glock pistol from a contact in New York. He admitted to handing the gun to the back seat. He stated clearly that his nephew, Orlando Anderson, was the one who pulled the trigger. He described the hunt for Tupac, the missed opportunities, and the final confrontation at Flamingo and Koval. For years, he operated under the belief that his immunity deal protected him. Or perhaps he simply believed that after so much time, the police didn't care. He was wrong. In September 2023, Las Vegas police arrested Duane Keefe D Davis and charged him with murder with use of a deadly weapon. The indictment alleges that while he did not pull the trigger, he was the ringleader who orchestrated the plan and provided the weapon. Under Nevada law, aiding and abetting a murder carries the same weight as committing the act itself. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Finally, a name was attached to the crime in a court of law. The ghost of 1996 had returned to demand accountability. The legal proceedings against Keefe D are currently unfolding. His defense argues that his past confessions were fabrications made for profit and entertainment, tall tales told by an old gangster trying to stay relevant. The prosecution argues that his own words, corroborated by the timeline and witness statements, are a confession to murder. This trial represents the best, and perhaps the last, chance for the state of Nevada to close the book on the killing of Tupac Shakur. But even if a conviction is secured, does it truly solve the mystery? Does it explain the systemic failures that allowed violence to consume so many young men in that era? Does it heal the wound left in the culture? Forensically, we must look at how the investigation was handled in 1996 versus how it would be handled today. In 1996, there were no widespread surveillance cameras covering every inch of the Strip as there are now. There was no social media to track movements in real time. Ballistics technology was less advanced. Today, digital forensics, cell phone triangulation, and advanced DNA profiling would likely have solved the case in weeks. The fact that the white Cadillac was never recovered is a glaring failure that would be almost impossible in the modern surveillance state. We must also consider the legacy of the music. In the years following his death, Tupac released more music than he did while he was alive. His work ethic was inhuman. He recorded hundreds of songs, sensing that his time was short. These posthumous releases cemented his status as a prophet. He spoke of his own death constantly in his lyrics. In the song I Ain't Mad at Shah, the video depicts him being shot and rapping from heaven. This eerie foresight adds a supernatural layer to his story. He was a man who looked death in the eye and kept writing. The tragedy of Tupac Shakur is not just that he died, but that he died before he could fully evolve. He was 25. He was in a transition period, trying to leave the gangster lifestyle behind and become a more mature activist and executive. He spoke of starting a political party. He wanted to build community centers. The bullets that flew on Flamingo Road didn't just kill a rapper. They killed a potential leader who had the ear of millions. As we look back at the timeline, the fight, the drive, the shooting, the hospital, the silence, and now the arrest, we see a mosaic of American violence. It is a story of race, fame, and the destructive power of ego. It is a story where the glittering promise of Las Vegas meets the cold reality of the streets. The arrest of Keefe D brings us closer to the who and the how, but the why remains a complex web of social dynamics that no court case can fully unravel. Was it just a gang fight? Or was it the inevitable conclusion of a life lived on the edge? As the trial progresses, DCF Investigations will be watching closely. We will continue to analyze the evidence, the testimony, and the legacy of that dark night in September. The file may be technically open, but for the millions who still listen to his voice, the case is more than a legal matter. It is a cultural wound that refuses to heal. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the assassination of Tupac Shakur. We have traversed the neon streets, the hospital corridors, and the murky waters of conspiracy. Now, we turn the investigation over to you. Do you believe the arrest of Keefe D is the final chapter? Or is there a deeper level to this story that remains hidden? Was this a simple act of gang retaliation, or do the more complex theories of industry involvement hold water? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This has been a DCF Investigations special report. Stay vigilant